television, isn't it?
Or those who rarely bother with these kind of things. Sally and I are joined by Cornelia Meyer, Chief Executive of MRL Corporation. It's really great to have you on the program. We'll talk about the crow's feet and the getting kids out of the house a bit later on, but let's start with the Financial Times and these efforts by the Federal Reserve. You know, Bank of England also planning this, what they're calling this quantitative easing, but clearly this strategy has not impressed the markets.
No, it has not impressed the markets, and sort of it's a half-baked strategy, especially of the Federal Reserve, to try and push interest rates a little bit further by swapping treasuries from three-year maturity to 30-year maturity. And, you know, especially going, you know, it contradicts our second article, which is the IMF saying we're really concerned about these sustained low interest rates. And that is true, because we are losing all the weapons in our arsenal. Plus, with the Bank of England, they say, well, maybe we want to do quantitative easing in November. Well, the problem is now, and I would argue, but I'm a Keynesian, I would argue we need a bigger government, broader spending, and end the austerity cuts, given where we are right now.
You know, a lot of people listening to you, and we're very clear, there's lots of people out there with ideas. There's a big debate on, is, of course, the issue of government debt and the amount of debt they're holding is what is so concerning right now. And obviously, if governments were just to plough in there, invest more money into their economies, then that would just make that scenario even worse.
That's true. And absolutely, we have too much debt. But in the meantime, if we have such bad austerity cuts, we are risking of having a whole bunch of people falling through the cracks, and these people will not be consumers, and these people will not buy goods, so we don't need to produce the goods. We are sort of a little bit damned if we do and damned if we don't.
When you say, you know, the Federal Reserve, that, you know, the arguments about whether this move is effective or not, Operation Twist, as we are calling it, what was the alternative for the Fed to do something?
Well, they could have pushed for more QE, for more quantitative easing, which currently they can't do. Don't forget one thing, the US is in a real bind now because they just got downgraded, and they got downgraded not really because they needed to be downgraded, but because the political process couldn't deal with the debt ceiling.
You're thinking that this is also as much about politics as it is about economics, because, you know, it is clear there needs to be more spending to stimulate the economy, but you had the Republicans, as we were saying yesterday, they've written to the Fed and, you know, with a warning saying, look, you can't push that down the road. And of course, there's the debate with the Obama jobs bill. They don't want any more spending, they want more cuts. The president is in a bind, and until there is some movement, you're going to see for some time. And
I think the US political system has really proved to be inept at dealing with the crisis. I mean, quibbling over the debt ceiling was very, very damaging.
But then they're also arguing the quibbling in Europe is incredibly damaging as well. And is that the age we're living in now, where things move so fast and the markets reacting by the minute, and politics cannot keep up? The political wrangling just cannot be quick enough for the reaction and the devastation we're seeing in terms of the buying and the selling.
If there only were no elections, because we have elections, politicians need to grandstand. We see that especially with the euro debt, with Angela Merkel. Germany has every interest in the euro because countries can't devalue, and 35% of their exports go to that southern rim of the eurozone. So it helps their employment. But because Angela Merkel is politically in a corner, she will sort of grandstand and do things that are not in the long-term interest of her country.
What about this issue as well in The Guardian, that we highlighted the fact that, you know, the ratings agencies yesterday cutting the ratings on some of the biggest banks in the US, Bank of America being one of them. Is that justified? I mean, there's this argument that if anything went disastrously wrong again, there's no bailouts this time.
Yes, I mean, there may be bailouts, but there may not be bailouts. That not knowing could there be bailouts, is there enough money around, is what got the banks downgraded. And, you know, that is a very valid concern, because what we've done, we haven't taken debt out of the system. We've just shifted it from the private sector into the public sector.
But Cornelia, is anyone challenging the, if you like, the legitimacy of of these ratings agencies, because they've gotten it wrong in the past. And when they downgraded U.S. debt, and more recently Italy, we saw that reaction from the politicians that this is a political downgrade. This does not really represent the numbers in the picture on the ground, really.
Well, yeah, that is absolutely true. And with Italy, I would actually agree. With the US, not. If your political process is not capable of dealing with the economy, well, then yes, they do. And yes, they did get things wrong. And especially since Enron, there are concerns there.
Well, the subprime mortgage debt had a AAA rating. So, but let's move on swiftly, because we've got other stories to talk about. The Hewlett-Packard, the problems at the top, certainly for the man or woman who takes the position of CEO, it's not a long-term position, it would seem. They've had a lot of changes in 6 years.
That board needs some quiet and some steady going. If you look at Hewlett-Packard's strategy, they're yanking it around and around and around, and that is not a good thing. Now they say we don't want to do hardware anymore, we only want to do software. Are they really the best people, the best equipped to do that? So they need a really firm, steady, safe pair of hands, and they need to give that person the time to implement their strategy.
So is Mr. Apotheker on the way out, do you think?
I guess so, but it's again what we discussed before. Some things just...
Move to the Gulf news and our top story as well here on BBC News. President Obama met with Mahmoud Abbas, told him, we will veto your bid to become full member of the UN. Isn't it amazing? A year ago, President Obama was saying the Palestinians deserve a state. Now, a year later, with an election on the horizon and Republicans excoriating him for his Israel policy, he now says, I will use the...
Again, it's election time. He needs to do whatever gets him elected, and he has some very powerful lobbyists that do not want to see a Palestinian state. But if you look at it, Palestine probably does need a state. They need a certain status in order to be able to go into the direct negotiations with Israel and see them, face to face at the same level.
But perhaps what is surprising is that President Obama is saying, yes, he rejects this bid and he will veto it, and only talks can lead to a state. But no one seems to be able to provide a framework for the talks. Right now.
Well, the talks are very, very difficult, and the issues are difficult. I mean, I really empathize with Palestinians saying, well, as long as you have the settlement policy. I can, to a certain degree, also empathize with the Israelis who feel just very, very worried having the Qassam rockets hitting them all the time.
Let's just lift the tone a little bit as we're drawing to a close here and talk about these Venetian parents who've had to seek legal help to move the son out of the nest.
It's quite extraordinary, isn't it? It's quite extraordinary.
People having to go to this length to move on their children.
Yeah, but in Italy, I mean, in Italy, also in the Middle East, kids living for a long time, but in Italy they live in, and the extraordinary thing is they're not willing to help. I mean, if you stay at home, at least you might help with cooking, cleaning.
No, he wants his clothes washed, and he wants his ravioli at a particular temperature.
Well, chuck him out.
He's become a bit aggressive as well, apparently, in response to this move. But anyway.
Well, I think he needs some tough love here.
He needs some tough love. Thank you very much for being with us, Cornelia. Cornelia Meyer with us for the news.